Rory McIlroy confronts Rolapp in a heated TPC locker room screaming match. This isn't a disagreement between colleagues. It's the face of the tour screaming at the NFL suit who just took the keys to the castle. And honestly, the arrogance is staggering. Rolap parachuted in from the NFL, looked at 50 years of golf tradition, and gutted the membership status of the very players who built this league. 25 guys lost their cards. The purses got slashed. And now the poster boy is yelling at him in a locker room while the rank and file watch in disbelief? It's pure entitlement bleeding the system dry. But look past the screaming. McIlroy isn't just throwing a tantrum. He's exposing what I call the exempt trap. He realized Rolap's shiny new Track 2 system is a corporate shell game, designed to shift leverage away from the superstars and onto the suits. Rory called it a glorified Korn Ferry event. That one line might have just started a war he can't win. Personally, I think Rolap just picked the absolute worst guy to poke. Do you agree? Tell me below. And if the real business of golf is what you're here for, you're in the right place. Subscribe. To understand why this screaming match matters, you first have to understand who Rory McIlroy is right now in 2026. He's the second best player on the planet. 6 major championships. Masters wins in 2025 and 2026. 30 PGA Tour wins, the face of this sport for over a decade. And this year alone, he's played 14 events. 14. He won twice. Finished top 5 in 9 of them. He's been the most consistent player on tour by a wide margin. The guy is grinding every single week, showing up to venues from Pebble Beach to Augusta to Congressional, and he's doing it while the ground underneath the entire tour is being ripped apart by a front office that treats players like line items on a balance sheet. But here's the thing about Rory. He's always been the diplomat. When the LIV Golf War started, Rory was on the front lines defending the PGA Tour. He gave the press conferences. He pushed for a deal. And when that deal fell apart, he admitted he was wrong to push for it. So when Rory McIlroy speaks now, people listen. Not because he's loud, because he's usually careful. He gave everything to this place. He defended it when it was under attack. But something changed in 2026. Rory started showing up to press conferences with a different energy. His answers got shorter. His patience got thinner. He called the new system a glorified Korn Ferry event. He said the Canadian Open shouldn't be sacrificed. He pointed out that the tour was fine before LIV came along and created a false economy. These weren't the words of a diplomat. And the players noticed. The whole locker room noticed. Because when the poster boy starts talking like that, it means the patience is gone. He'd reached his limit. But what pushed him over the edge wasn't just his own frustration. It was watching the sport he loved get dismantled piece by piece. Rolap wasn't supposed to be the villain of this story. He came from the NFL. 23 years there, chief media and business officer. He knew how to run a sports league. He knew how to negotiate TV deals. What he didn't know was golf. Not the way the players know it. He didn't grow up with the game. He didn't understand why a tournament like the Canadian Open matters. He just saw inefficiency. And that's what scared everyone. Because when an outsider sees inefficiency, he doesn't see history. He sees numbers. He sees things that can be cut. And Rolap started cutting. The first change came quietly. Field sizes dropped. The tour said it was about pace of play. The players didn't buy it. But that was just the warm-up. And here's what nobody outside the tour really grasps about those field cuts. When you go from 156 to 144, you're not just trimming numbers. You're cutting the Monday qualifiers. You're cutting the guys who grind through Q school just to get one start. You're cutting the sponsor exemptions that give a 22-year-old from a small town his first shot at a PGA Tour paycheck. Those spots are gone. And the guys who filled them? They're caddying now, or teaching lessons at Muni courses, or they're done with the game entirely. The real bomb came when Rolap announced the membership cuts. For years, the top 125 players on the FedEx Cup standings kept their full PGA Tour cards. Finish in the top 125, and you're safe for next year. You have status. You have a job. Rolap slashed that number to 100. 25 guys. Just like that. Gone. 25 players who had guaranteed status now had nothing. These aren't the superstars. These are the guys fighting every week just to keep their jobs. The guys with families. The guys with mortgages. Rolap didn't just hurt those 25 players. He sent a message to everyone else. If you're not in the top 100, you're expendable. And then he went further. He introduced the Track 1 and Track 2 system. Track 1, 23 events, $20 million purses. Track 2, 20 events, $4 million purses. Total exempt players, 90, down from 125. And think about what Track 2 actually looks like week to week. You're playing for $4 million instead of 20. You're at venues that don't get the same TV windows. You're fighting for 20 promotion spots while knowing that one bad month, one wrist injury, one missed cut streak, and you're back on the Korn Ferry grind. The guys on Track 2 aren't playing golf. They're surviving. Every Thursday morning they tee it up, knowing their entire livelihood rides on 4 rounds. Rolap called it efficiency. The players called it destruction. Numbers on a spreadsheet don't tell the whole story. But there was one tournament in particular that made Rory see red, and it wasn't just about the money. It was June 2026, the US Open Media Day. Rory walked into the press conference room looking tired, frustrated. Someone asked him about the Canadian Open, about whether it might be relegated to Track 2. Rory didn't hesitate. He said, "An event like last week, the Canadian Open, potentially going to one of these Track 2s? Track 2 is like a glorified Korn Ferry event. That's what Track 2 is going to be. I don't think the Canadian Open should be one of those. The Korn Ferry Tour is the PGA Tour's developmental league, the minor leagues." Rory was saying Rolap's system was just the minor leagues with a new name. He didn't stop there. He said, "You start to realize the way the tour was before LIV came along was actually pretty good. LIV created this false economy where we had to up prize funds and cut fields." He said the tour was fine before LIV. He said Rolap was using LIV as an excuse to destroy the system. That was the moment the locker room started paying attention. The room went dead quiet after that quote. You could hear the air conditioning humming. A reporter from the Golf Channel tried to follow up, asked if Rory was suggesting Rolap was manufacturing a crisis. Rory just looked at him and said, "I'm suggesting the tour had a perfectly functional model for 50 years, and now we're tearing it down because one league showed up with a checkbook." Then he moved on to the next question, like he hadn't just dropped a grenade, and when reporters asked about his own membership status, the room got quiet. Rory had played only 14 events in 2026. The minimum is 15. He needed a hardship exemption, and that exemption had to come from Brian Rolapp, the guy Rory just called out, the guy whose system Rory just insulted. Rory had just publicly embarrassed the man who controlled his career. Rory had publicly embarrassed the man who controlled his career. He'd called the system a joke. He'd insulted the CEO's plan. And now he had to ask that same CEO for a favor. The tension was building. Everyone in the locker room knew something was coming. Rolap didn't respond immediately. He waited. He let the comments hang. And then, when everyone least expected it, he walked into the locker room. It happened after a round. At TPC, Rolap walked in and Rory was there, still in his golf gear, still amped up from the round. What matters is that Rory saw him. Rory walked up to him, no hesitation, and he let him have it. He called the system a joke. He demanded to know why the Canadian Open was being sacrificed. The volume went up. The screaming match started. Other players stopped what they were doing. Staff looked away. Now picture the space. TPC. Locker rooms aren't massive. You've got maybe 20 guys in there at any given time. Benches lined up, towels hanging, guys icing wrists, taping fingers, checking phones. When two voices go up in that room, there's nowhere to look, nowhere to go. Every single person in there heard every word. The guys at the far end by the showers heard it. The trainers in the back room heard it. The caddies waiting outside the door heard it. And then Rolap said something that changed everything. He brought up Rory's membership status, the 14 starts, the exemption Rory needed. The subtext was clear. You're yelling at me, but I decide your future. Rory realized the trap he'd walked into. He was screaming at the guy who held his career in his hands. The locker room watched. Some players nodded in solidarity. Others shook their heads. The screaming match eventually ended. Rolap walked out. Rory stayed behind. A couple of the younger guys, the ones still fighting for their cards, walked over to Rory after Rolap left. Nobody said much. One of them just put a hand on his shoulder. Rory sat on the bench, still in his spikes, and stared at the floor for a long time. Nobody pressed him. Nobody had to, They all understood what just happened. But the war wasn't over. Rory walked out of that locker room fuming. He thought he'd made his point. He thought the fight was over. But Rolap wasn't finished. He had a press conference coming up. A few days later, at the Travelers Championship, Rolap stepped up to the podium, calm, composed. Reporters asked about Rory's comments, about the screaming match. He said, "Yeah, I had a chance to speak with Rory today. We talked a bit about it." He made it sound like a casual chat. He said, "Right now we have 47 events. We'll have 47 events going forward. That model serves roughly 230 players. We'll serve that amount the same." He was saying nothing had changed. When asked about the Challenger Series, he defended it, said the events would be at recognizable venues with healthy purses. He was polite, calm, and that's what made him dangerous. One reporter pressed him on the exemption question, asked point-blank whether Rory's 14 starts would be forgiven or whether the minimum would be enforced. Rolap smiled, adjusted the microphone, and said, "We handle those conversations privately." 3 words that told everyone in the room exactly how much leverage he still held. Rory had screamed. Rory had lost his cool. Rolap stood at a podium and smiled. He looked like the adult in the room. Rolap was winning the PR war. Rolap was winning the PR war. But the locker room wasn't fooled. The players knew exactly what was happening behind the scenes, and they started picking sides. Tiger Woods was the first to speak publicly. He's on the policy board. He was part of the group that approved the changes. He said, "This work was bigger than any one player or person. It was about designing the strongest possible version of the PGA Tour for the future." He was backing Rolap. His silence on the screaming match was deafening. He didn't defend Rory. Tiger had chosen a side, and it wasn't Rory's. And that stung, because Tiger and Rory go back 20 years, Ryder Cups together, President's Cups, practice rounds at Augusta. Tiger was the guy Rory looked up to when he was a teenager in Holywood, Northern Ireland, watching the Sunday back nine on a tiny TV in his parents' kitchen. And now Tiger was standing on the other side of the room. Justin Thomas was different. JT is one of Rory's closest friends on tour. They travel together. They practice together. When the locker room split, JT was firmly in Rory's corner. He didn't say much publicly. He didn't need to. His silence on the Rolap plan said everything. He's with Rory. Scotty Scheffler was the wild card, world number 1. He has his own issues with the USGA, but he hasn't said much about Rolap's plan. He's staying above the fray. His silence is strategic. He can afford to wait. But the other players, the 25 who lost their exempt cards, they aren't talking. They can't afford to. Their careers are on the line. They're watching Rory fight their battle, hoping he wins, but not joining him. That's the reality of the locker room right now. Divided, scared, waiting to see what happens next. But the biggest irony of this whole situation is something almost nobody is talking about, because Rory is also fighting a battle that makes him look like a hypocrite. Earlier in the year, he supported the USGA ball rollback, the rollback most players hate. He said it would make almost no difference to the average golfer, but now he's screaming at Rolap for changes some players think are less harmful than the ball rollback. He's fighting for tradition while supporting a change that attacks it. Some players think he's a hypocrite, and the rollback isn't some abstract policy. It takes roughly 10 to 15 yards off driver for the longest hitters. That changes club selection on every par 5. It changes how you attack a par 4 into the wind. It changes the entire architecture of how a course plays. And Rory, the guy who can bomb at 330, looked at that and said it was fine. Then turned around and lost his mind over track 2. The contradiction isn't lost on the guys in the locker room. That's the complicated reality of Rory in 2026. He's not a perfect hero. He has enemies in the front office, in the locker room, in the media, but he also has allies. Justin Thomas. The rank-and-file players too scared to speak. Fans who see him as the defender of the game. The question is, can Rory win a war when the opposing general holds his contract? Rolap can give the exemption, or deny it. If he denies it, Rory's career is in jeopardy. He'd have to qualify like a rookie. That's the power Rolap holds, and Rory knows it. So understand this. Rory wasn't just yelling at a CEO, he was yelling at the man who controls his future. He knew the risks. He yelled anyway, because if Rory McIlroy can't win this fight, no one can. The 2026 season is teetering on a knife edge. Rory has had productive conversations with Rolap since the screaming match. He said, "Brian and I have been in constant dialogue since he took the job. I think we've built up a really good relationship. But has he backed down? Or is he just playing nice while the war continues behind closed doors?" What we do know is the changes are still coming. Track 1 and Track 2 are still happening. The membership cuts are still happening. The Canadian Open is still at risk. Rory may have calmed down. But the fight isn't over, because Rory McIlroy isn't the kind of guy who gives up. The locker room is watching. The fans are watching. Will Rory back down? Will Rolap compromise? Or will this screaming match be the beginning of something that tears the PGA Tour apart? The 2026 season is just getting started, and Rory McIlroy just fired the first shot.